so that a copy of it, it will be available. A question was asked, where are the men with the God-given wisdom? Where are the men with the God-given wisdom? May I make a suggestion? I want to say this to every woman. If you have a daughter, if you have a friend, a woman, a girl, a sister, a niece, a nephew, an aunt, whomever, that has an interest in being married, make a list, write down a list of your core values. Write down a list of your core values. We're talking about the fundamental beliefs that serve as guiding principles to manage your beliefs and behaviors about things that are right and wrong. What are your core values? When people do not have compatible core values, it's no way possible for them to have a comfortable nor compatible relationship. So what is your core? What are your core values? What are the values that govern your behavior and your beliefs about things that are right and wrong? Okay, when you do that, then start reading. Now, this is going to sound simple, but it's a biblical concept, and God knows best. Start reading and meditating up on the Proverbs. That's 31 chapters. Start meditating and reading on the Proverbs. That's Solomon's wisdom literature. Study one chapter per month. That'll give you 30 plus months of studying. That's almost 3 years. Now, follow my instruction carefully. When you are reading, when you're studying that chapter per month, write a specific note about the points in the verses that you do understand. Now, don't fret over the verses that you do not understand. When you read the Proverbs, there's enough of it that is simple enough for you to understand that you do not have to fret over what you don't understand. Far too often when people read the Bible, they stop reading because they come across something that they do not understand. And they fret over that. They get frustrated. No, just set that aside for the moment. Just skip over that for the moment. Just focus on what you do understand. I guarantee you that there is several things in every chapter that you will understand. Okay? So what you've done, two things. You have established your core values, and you have started creating you a commentary on the book of Proverbs. Now, whenever you meet a man, seek to find out what's his core values. Remember, I've already said that if your core values are not compatible with his core values, forget it. If you are a Christian and he's an atheist, you want a Bible in every room, you want to post scriptures on the mirror in every place, he doesn't want a Bible on the property. Okay? When you meet a man and you seek to find out what's his core values, don't worry about how he look, how much money he's got in the bank, how he dressed. All of those things can be fixed. He can be broke today and rich tomorrow. He can be a terrible dresser today and looking great tomorrow. But if his core values, they are not going to change by tomorrow. So that's significant. So find out what his core values are. Now listen to this carefully. If your values are compatible with him, then share your values. If your core values are not compatible with his, there's no need of dating consideration. Now, I want to underscore that in your mind. If your core values are not compatible with his, there's no need of even thinking about whether or not you might be able to successfully date. Listen, don't do that. Don't start a dating relationship if your core values are not compatible. If you are honest and he's a thief, why would you start dating him? Well, we're going to see if we can fix it. No, stop that nonsense. However, you may offer a better set of values for consideration. If he rejects it, there's no need of further dating. If he accepts your core values, then that's another story. Once the values are out in the open, once you understand what his core values are, entice him to take the journey with you, to meditate on the Proverbs with you. If he refuses, there's no need for further dating consideration. Now, I know that's strong terminology, but I'm trying to help you. If you are a Christian and Christianity is significant to you, why would you start pursuing a close relationship with a person whose core values are incompatible with yours? Listen, if you hate smoke and you suffer from COPD, why would you start dating a chain smoker? It makes no sense. You're just setting yourself up for regular hospital visits and so you can die early. Well, we don't see how we could work it out. Maybe he would stop, maybe. No, stop that nonsense, because he might stop for a while. And then he's going to hate the fact that you made him stop. Okay? Now, I know what all of you are saying. You're saying that'll run men away. Now, listen to this. That's exactly what you want to do. You want to run men away who are not compatible with you. Remember, you should be sifting, not sorting. Therefore, you want to run everybody away except that one man who is for you. That one man that God has created and crafted and cultured for you. You only need that one man for your husband. You're not going to have several husbands. So you want to run the rest of them away because you are sifting, not sorting. Now, if you have any questions about how to apply that specifically, you know I'm thrilled for your questions at the end of this program or in person, etc. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. And most of you have spent too much time in relationships that's going nowhere, and you knew on day one that you were not compatible with that person. You knew on day one that your relationship was miserable with him, and you've already wasted 6 or 7 years, and now you've already passed up the man that God had for you because he saw you hanging out in a place you weren't supposed to be. So stop wasting all of that time. Sift through quickly, run all of them away who's not for you. You only need one. Now tonight, we are talking about what men wish women knew. Now, last week we talked about it from the wife perspective. And tonight we want to move and talk about it from the child perspective, or from the parent or the father perspective. Let me give you some significant points, because we got to identify the kind of man we're talking about. In a spiritual manner, a man trains a boy to handle life issues. In a spiritually progressive manner, a man trains a boy to handle life issues. In a spiritually progressive masculine manner, a man trains a boy to handle life issues. In a spiritually progressive masculine manner, a man trains a boy to handle life issues in a spiritual manner. I really wish I had the time tonight to cover each one of these in detail. As a matter of fact, there really needs to be a program for each one of those. We might do that at some point, but feel free to ask any questions about what any of these mean, okay? In a spiritually progressive masculine manner, a man trains a boy to handle life issues in a spiritually progressive manner. In a spiritually progressive masculine manner, A man trains a boy to handle life issues in a spiritually progressive, masculine manner. What would you think if you're the father of a child tells him, if you can't get the toy to work, throw it down on the ground, scream, cry, kick it, stomp it, break it up? No, that's not the way maturity handles issues like that. Men wish women knew how to celebrate them, not just tolerate them. How do men need to be celebrated? Someone asked me this question today. They said, I'm asking this question for another woman. She wanted to know how to celebrate a man. And I said, well, ask him, how does a person celebrate you? Now, certainly core values, basic spirituality has something to say. But for all practical purposes, a person has to ask you, find out from you. So men wish women knew how to celebrate them, not just tolerate them. Now, if I was speaking to men about women, I would say to men, women want to be celebrated. So this is not a one-sided presentation. It just so happened tonight I'm speaking to the women. So how do men need to be celebrated? See, the first thing you want to do is celebrate them the way they need to be celebrated before you start celebrating them based upon how they want to be celebrated. It is the same concept in raising children. You make sure they eat the green vegetables that they need before you give them the dessert that they want. What happens if you start giving the children first when they sit down to the table what they want? They will never eat what they need. So we need to understand, what is it that men need from a value perspective? Wisdom. Men need to know that their wisdom is wanted, is welcomed, and believed to be worthwhile for the children. Now, last week, we talked about how important it is and how it is that men want their wisdom to be wanted, welcomed, and believed to be worthwhile for their wives. Well, the same is true for their children. They want to believe that I am a contributor that is worthwhile, and I contribute more than just sperm and money for this particular package. So men want to know, need to know that women understand that their wisdom is wanted, welcomed, and worthwhile for the children. Let me pose a few questions. Why would you bring a father into your relationship if you do not believe that God has given him wisdom? Why would you bring an ignorant father into your relationship with your children? Far too often, women will marry after they have children, and they will place their children in subjection to a man who has exercise, who has no wisdom whatsoever, or at least his behavior doesn't indicate that he has wisdom. Why would you marry a man that is as immature as your children? Why would you do that? Why would you bring a father into your relationship who you do not believe that God has given him wisdom? Why would you bring a father into your relationship if you do not believe that God has given him wisdom for your children? I mean, why would you do that? Please don't do that, okay? Men need to know that their wisdom is wanted, welcomed, and believed to be worthwhile. Why would you bring a father into your relationship if he has not demonstrated some God-given wisdom? I mean, why would you do that? Why would you bring a man into a dating relationship, and definitely into a relationship as your husband, when he is as silly, he is as childish as your children? Why in the world would you do that? Can you imagine what a family like that's going to be? You're telling your son, get up and get to work, get to school on time. And then your husband is saying, oh, don't worry about being 20 minutes late. No problem. That makes sense. All you're doing is creating a problem for yourself, okay? So why would you not want and welcome the worthwhile, God-given wisdom of the Father who has fathered your children? Why would you not want and welcome that God-given wisdom for the man who has fathered your children? Men need to know that their wisdom is wanted, is welcomed, and it is worthwhile to his wife for their children. Do not wish to circumvent his wisdom. See, if you're trying to circumvent his wisdom, you must have brought a person who has little wisdom into the relationship. Do not seek to circumvent his wisdom. Trust the wisdom of God that he has given to your husband for your children. Now, I want you to pay close attention to this. I want you to turn in your Bible to Ephesians chapter 6 and verse number 4, because this is a biblical concept that I want to communicate to you. God-given wisdom will cause a father to desire to educate his children. He will desire to educate his children in the discipline and instructions of the Lord. There are too many churches where the mother is on her way to Sunday school with the children and her husband is in the bed asleep, or he's washing and waxing the car. What do you think your son's going to want to do as soon as he gets big enough to get his daddy to give him consent to stay at home with him? The father's going to say, I'm at home. It's okay for him. Your son is going to say, well, daddy is here. What's wrong with me staying here? And some of you listening right now have had this problem. So you can testify to the validity of what I'm sharing with you. So God-given wisdom will cause fathers to desire to educate their children in the discipline and the instructions of the Lord. Pay close attention to this idea. Here is what Ephesians 6 and verse 4 says. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, if you are a Christian woman, you have children from a previous relationship, or you desire to have children, why would you marry a man who cannot do what God told him to do? How is a father who has no knowledge of the will of God, has no interest in the will of God, how is he going to bring your children up in the discipline and instructions of the Lord? See, it's nonsense to go out and get yourself connected with a person like that and then spend the rest of your life miserably and painful and badgering him until he decides to leave. Do not, this is a statement to fathers. Do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, the King James translation says, do not anger them to anger. The New American Standard says, do not provoke them. Now, here's what that really means. It's saying, fathers, don't do things that anger your children just to anger them, just because you have the authority to do so. See, don't do that. That's an instruction for the father. Don't do that. Do not provoke your children to anger, but rather to bring them up in the discipline and the instructions of the Lord. There are far too many fathers that just allow their sons and their children to just do whatever they want to do and then justify it by making such ignorant statement. Well, you know, he's a boy. Yeah, he's a boy, but he needs instructions. He needs discipline and instructions of the Lord. Otherwise, you're simply raising a professional hoodlum. Yes, I said that. You are raising a professional hoodlum, and you don't need to do that. You are messing up the next generation. If you do not take into consideration who it is that you are marrying, what you're simply doing is creating in your sons the kind of father, the kind of husband, the kind of man, rather, that you hate in a husband. You are training your son to be like your father that you don't like and putting him off on somebody else. So guess what? You continue that unfortunate cycle. So fathers, we must educate our children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, to educate, that means to bring them up in the discipline. Now, let's look at that word discipline. That word discipline literally means visible demonstration that entices correct behavior. Now, pay very close attention to this, because that's what that word discipline means. It means to provide a visible demonstration that will entice your children to have correct behavior. So that means, fathers, you can't say, do as I say, do and not as I do. You got to provide a visible demonstration that entices correct behavior. So fathers, what you're doing, and women, you need to be connected with a man, with a husband, who is providing a visible demonstration. Now, if he has not provided a visible demonstration up to the day of the wedding, he is not going to start providing it the day after the wedding. So if he has not provided it, if he is not providing a visible demonstration, don't set a wedding date. You probably need to sift and go in another direction. So fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the visible demonstrations that entice correct behavior. He's saying, fathers, you entice your children to behave correctly because that's exactly what they see you doing. So we must cultivate the mind and the morals of our children. In about 2 weeks, we're going to have a special program where we're going to be talking about how do you do that as parents? How do we get control of the mind of our children and the morals of our children? So fathers, demonstrate for your children that which God approves. We become negligent and abusive toward our children when we fail to demonstrate the message of the Lord for them. So fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline. What does that mean? Visible demonstration that entices correct behavior. Now let's look at this verse again. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction. Well, what did I mean by instruction? What does that word mean in Ephesians 6:4? It means a verbal explanation that entices correct behavior of the Lord. Now, notice what happened. Notice he put the visible demonstration first and then a verbal explanation. So by the time your children are big enough and mature enough to understand an explanation, they should have already been seeing a visible demonstration. By the time your children are big enough to hold a fork and a knife and you to tell them how to cut up their meat, they should have already been seeing you hold your knife and fork properly. If you do not hold your knife and fork properly, and then now you're telling them it doesn't work that way. So fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction, verbal explanation that entices correct behavior. Fathers, stop letting mothers be the instructor of your children. That is your God-given assignment. And women, stop putting men into your life who can't do that. Why would you do that? He's going to ruin your children. Don't cross your fingers and hope it doesn't happen. That doesn't make sense. So we must cultivate the mind and the morals of our children. Explain to our children what God approves. What God approves. Explain to them what God approves. Okay? Now, educate your children all the way to maturity. Now, many parents make a mistake. They say, well, they're 18 now, and I'm not going to give them. No, listen, all of my children are grown. Some of my grandchildren are grown. They will never be too old for me to share a word of wisdom with. And I can say, praise the Lord, that even at this age, they have either, at least when I share wisdom with them, even if they decide not to do it, it's not an argument. That is exactly what I should do. That is father's responsibility, because it makes no difference how smart my children become. I will still have 20 plus years of wisdom over them and experience. And so I don't care unless I had dementia, I will know something to share with them. So we educate them all the way up to maturity. Now, that doesn't mean that I barge into their life and I try to dictate what they ought to do as adults. But if I see them making a bad decision, it's my responsibility to share my wisdom and knowledge and understanding with them. We don't stop sharing wisdom and knowledge and instruction with anybody else because they're grown. You are still trying to convince your grown friends to go to Walmart for a sale. You don't say, well, I just let them make a decision. No, you share good wisdom. That's what good friends do. So take advantage of the teachable moments. Education includes both visible demonstrations and verbal explanations that entice correct behavior. But notice visible demonstrations come first, followed by verbal explanation. So fathers, you can't say, well, I'm not one who talks. No, that's what you have to do. Children can visibly see before they can mentally understand. So if you wait until they get to the point for mental understanding, you have waited too late. When the window of opportunity diminishes, the effective influence declines. Start early, for it is better to build good young men than to try to repair bad old men. All right. Now, men wish that women knew that their wisdom was wanted, welcomed, and worthwhile. Now, I want to give you something else to think about that's on the other side of that coin, and then we'll open up for questions. You can go ahead now and type your questions in the Q&A section. You can get your finger ready to raise your hand so we can come to all of your questions tonight. Pay close attention. Men wish women knew that their presence is profitable. Men wish that women knew that their presence is profitable. Therefore, men wish that women knew how to prefer and pleasure their preference. When women prefer and pleasure their presence, they will then learn how to celebrate, not just tolerate the man. Now, listen to this carefully. Men wish women knew that their presence is preferred, pleasurable, and profitable. See, God's placed the father in the home to be somewhat of a disciplinarian. And often men are looked at as the disciplinarian, the mean corrector, the party pooper. But men wish that women knew that their presence is preferred, pleasurable, and profitable. It is now time for your questions. I love questions, so don't be shy and bashful with the questions. Go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A section, or you can raise your hand and ask your question verbally, whichever you prefer. I'm going to be highly disappointed if there are no questions tonight. I'm going to be downright upset if there are no questions tonight. If you leave this audience tonight with your questions and not ask them, I'm going to be grossly disappointed. What are your questions tonight? What are your questions? Somebody make up a question, because after the first person asks a question, and then everybody else will start asking their questions. Once we get that first question, someone make up a question so that we can get the first question asked. All right. Now, we're not going to let you go. We're going to keep you on the phone we're going to keep you on here tonight until you ask a question, until somebody asks a question. Please, somebody ask a question. Don't make me beg for questions. Well, either I have confused you or convinced you that I don't know what I'm talking about and you're not going to waste your time with a question, or I have thoroughly informed you and you know exactly what men wish, and I'm going to subscribe to the latter. I'm going to assume that I have done such a thorough job and that there are no questions because of that. All right, here's a question. What do you think worries men the most about Christian women? Their inconsistency. Because if you start out as a Christian from day one, he knows what you are about. And he may decide that's not the kind of woman that I want. Well, your values are different. So you don't prefer that dating relationship any further. So what worries him, see, people don't really have a problem with people being Christians. Nobody don't have a major problem. Nobody has a problem with you being willing to forgive. Nobody has a problem with you being kind. Nobody has a problem with you being compassionate. Nobody has a problem with those kinds of things. Now, people may have a problem with you trying to get them to be that way. That's why it's so important to make sure his value system embraces your value system. So when you start sharing with him a better way to live, he'll embrace that. It is just like if you're trying to convince someone to save some money, don't spend all of your money. And then when they realize that's a better way to live, and they see, an accident or an emergency or something can come up, and it is good to have a rainy day fund. People don't oppose that when they see the value of it. Now, there are men that may want you to think that they are worried about you as a Christian woman, and that is simply because you will not participate in some things that they prefer you to participate in. But once again, if you've laid your value system out, they know from the beginning. For example, I do not smoke. I don't buy cigarettes for people. So everybody knows I'm not going to buy cigarettes. So guess what? I'm not going to go buy cigarettes for you. So if that's the kind of person you want as a friend relationship, then I'm not the person for you. You need to go find somebody else, because I don't do it that way. Now, I don't make a character issue about a person who decides to smoke cigarettes. I just simply decided to opt out myself. Hope that answer will help somewhat. We have a second question. What do women do if the man does not believe that his presence is preferred? Well, we need to ask the question of why. If he sees his influence being embraced, then he will know that his presence is preferred. In this sense, well, his presence is preferred. Think of it like this. A parent said once, "My money only goes where my advice goes." So what do we want the presence of the Father here for? Does his presence simply always tend to restrict us? Does his presence tend to restrict us? And if so, are we aggravated by it? For example, suppose two people are married and they have two sons that's always fighting. So wherever they go, the father goes with the family. So when the boys get to fighting, the father breaks up the fight. The mother is glad that the father broke up the fight. Guess what? That father will believe that his presence is preferred. But if the wife says, "Why didn't you let him fight?" he will believe that his presence is not preferred. So your response to what his presence brings will help convince him as to whether or not his presence is preferred. Is his presence appreciated, or do we wish he had stayed at home so the boys could kill each other? Thanks for that question. Another question: what if you already married and you and your husband are not compatible? Then you need to do what Peter teaches in 1 Peter chapter 3. I'm going to turn over there in my Bible and read that for you. But now don't forget, there were people that Jesus couldn't get changed. Judas hung out with Jesus for 3 years, and Jesus was unable to get him to change. So guess what? You may not be able to get your husband to change. It just may not be. Everybody isn't interested in doing what is right. But here is what Peter said to a wife who was married to a rebellious husband. He said, "In the same way, you wives, be submissive to your own husbands, so that even if any of them are disobedient to the word, they may be," now notice, he didn't say they definitely would be, "they may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives as they observe your chaste and respectful behavior." When you cannot get a person to follow wise instructions, You cannot influence them with visible demonstrations of spirituality. You cannot persuade them with verbal explanations of spirituality. The only thing you can do is pray that God will change his mind. And there are some couples in that predicament on both sides of the issue. There are some wives who are never going to change. There are some husbands who are never going to change. And the only thing that you can do, you have done everything you know to do and nothing has worked. The only option you have is to pray that God give them an experience that will cause them to change their mindset favorable so you can be compatible. There is no 1, 2, 3 that we can do and guarantee success. That's why it is so important to try to make the right decision on the front end. There was someone told me that the founder of Chick-fil-A had a saying. He said, it's better to restrain Mustangs than to have to kick mules. His point was, if you can't get them to do it, it's better to restrict a person who has some motivation than to try to motivate a person who has none. And so that's why you want to be very, very intentional in who you are selecting for to be your husband and the father of your children. We have another question. As a further explanation of the first question, the man may believe that his only duty is to bring home the bacon and provide for the basic need and has no further obligation to his family, and his presence is not needed. See, that's what you got to figure out before you marry him. That's what dating is designed to do, to find out, is this person's values compatible with mine? If you want to have children and you want to get married and you are dating a man and he believes that the only thing he is supposed to do is to make some money and provide a house and a car and utility bill, and he doesn't believe that he has any responsibility to teach and train the children, why would you keep dating that man? Why would you move forward and marry him? His values are not compatible with yours. So we've got to start making better decisions. Listen, a company will look at your resume and they will look at your criminal record and decide not to hire you. Why? Because they're not going to hire you and then try to rehabilitate you. Too many wives marry men and then try to rehabilitate him and then get frustrated. No, if he's not on the path of rehabilitating, leave him where he is. I don't care what he looks like, what he smells like, and how much money he has. If his values are not compatible with yours, you're going to spend some day crying. I'm telling you, I don't care what kind of money he has. I don't care what he looks like. I don't care what he smells like. If his values are not compatible with yours, you are going to be brought to tears a minute a day, and you can avoid that if you will make sure his values are compatible. So you need to stay away from the movies, stay away from the dances, stay away from the dinners, and sit out under the tree and have conversation to find out what's in his head. If there's nothing in his head, what's in his pocket won't be there long. But if he's got something in his head, he can get something in his pocket. So you are looking at what's in his head. What is his value system? That is crucial and critical. And if you don't do that, you're making a bad, unwise decision. Another question. I am married. What are you to do when ideas changes from what you expected when dating? We did not have this kind of teaching. I thought we were on the right path. Well, I will say, if you are not on a compatible path, don't bring children into the marriage, because all you're doing is bringing in you another dimension that's going to cause pain and heartache. So what are you to do when ideas change? That's why, listen to this. Here's a little simple strategy. I'm going to give one of the men's strategies away. I shouldn't give our strategy away, but I'm going to give one of the men's strategies away. Listen, the way you determine what a man's value is, you don't look at how he treats you. Look at how he treats people from whom he's going to get nothing from. Everybody treats people well from whom they're going to get something. Jesus said, what value is it to give to people who will give to you? He said, give to those expecting nothing in return. So what you do is you look at how does he treat people from whom he's not going to get anything. Not how does he treat you. And that is the mistake that many women make. They make their decision based upon this man, based upon how he treats them. No, how does he treat people from whom he's not going to get anything from? That's what tells you about his character. I am married. What are you to do when ideas change from what you expected when dating? You got to verify. You got to verify. Listen, marriage is destroyed during the dating by the dating. Just about every marriage on the day of the wedding, the doom of it is already sealed. It is the marriage is destroyed by the way people date during the time that we're dating. Now, I know some of you want a fuller explanation for that, but if you'll contact me, I'll share that with you clear enough to where you will see that. So by the time of the date of your wedding, so the problem is we have got to change. See, here's the problem we're making, the mistake we're making. We are trying to change each other after we get married. No, we got to fix the issues in the dating. If the issues aren't compatible in the dating, we got to sift, let that person go and find the person that's compatible. We've got to stop getting married and then trying to fix the problem. We've got to let the problem-plagued person go. You've got to make better decisions from the dating. And I understand that these are things that nobody told me before. And these are things that we haven't heard. That's why you need to go to our YouTube channel and share this with every woman you know. Because these are the kinds of things that's going to determine the quality of the relationship that you're going to have. If you are married, listen, if you work 8 hours a day with a person whose values is different from yours, it's going to be miserable. If you're going to then come home and live 16 hours a day with a person whose values are incompatible with yours, you are really going to be miserable. And not only values are incompatible, you're going to be miserable. And now you got to make decisions with this person. You got to romance this person. It ain't happening. And some of you know what I'm talking about. You made the wrong decision. You're in it now. That's a whole different story. But we got to try to correct it in the next generation. So every mistake that you made in your generation, place some information in the lives of other people so they don't make that mistake in their generation. We're looking for more questions. I love it. Give me some more questions. That's all the questions. We have a few more minutes. We have about 15 more minutes if there are questions tonight. Now, I don't want to keep you unnecessarily, but I do want to make sure you get your question in. And for some reason, I think somebody might be typing in a question. Sure. All right. Someone said, could you elaborate on sifting and sorting? I'm so glad you asked that question. I'm so glad you asked that question. Now, think about this. When you sort, you rank. If you apply for a job, they have several candidates. And they rank those candidates. They sort those candidates. They say we're going after our number one candidate. If we can't get our number one candidate, we're going to go back and see if we can get our number two candidate. If we can't get our number two candidate, we'll go back to the number three candidate. The sifting process is different. You drop everybody except one. So there are no number two and three candidates. And you're looking for the person that has the greatest compatibility. And that's one. And so that sifting is, that's who I'm looking for. So everybody else goes to the wayside. Well, you say, what if this relationship doesn't work out? Listen, if you let number two go because he was dishonest and his value system didn't fit with yours, why would you go back to him? You need to go back to a whole different set of people. Listen, you let number two and three go for a reason. They were incompatible somewhere. So don't put them back in the mix. Don't do that. Get you another set of three because you are sifting and not sorting. Hopefully that'll answer that question for you. Another question says, can you speak on potential? Not totally sure what that means. If you go ahead quickly and type into the Q&A section a little more elaboration as to exactly what you mean. If you're talking about a man that has potential, potential sometimes is gauged based upon what is he doing now. See, if a person will, when you go to work on a job, If you are willing to follow instructions, your potential is great. But if you show up on a job and you're arguing with your trainer, you're arguing with the supervisor, you don't have a clue what to do, but you know everything, your potential is very limited. So one way you kind of gauge potential is this person receptive to knowledge and instruction that will help him or her improve their potential. If a person is not receptive to information and instruction, and if he is not receptive to correction, there's just not much he's going to be. Another person typed in, yes, a man with potential. He has some good characteristics. Not totally sure what that means, but I think many people have made mistakes with that. Sure, you don't just want somebody that has some good characteristics. For example, I know people who get up on time and they go to work. They work hard. They get there early. They'll stay late. They work hard. They manage their money very well. But they are drug users. So everybody has some good characteristics. You're looking beyond characteristics. You're looking for core values. If a person desires to honor God, they may be a thief at this point. He may not know that he shouldn't be thieving, but if he is willing to honor the value system that God set forth, then you can teach and train him or her. But if their value system is off-centered, for example, I had a couple that came in once for premarital counseling. He smoked marijuana. She did not smoke. She did not want him to smoke. And this was back in the day when people were stealing pages and cloning pages and cell phones. She said every day she come home from work, he had a floor full of pages, he and his buddies cloning them illegally and selling them. Now, there are two things. He was a nice guy. There was a lot of good characteristics about him, but he smoked marijuana and he stole pages. Now, this is a true story. So they came in for counseling, premarital counseling. I'm trying to get her to see, you need to put the brakes on this. So she came into the counseling session and she expressed her disagreement. He looked at her and said to her, I told you I like smoking marijuana and I'm going to keep on smoking marijuana and I'm going to keep on making money with these pages. You might as well not say anything else about it. So she knew then that I wasn't going to perform the wedding ceremony. So guess what? They didn't come back to me. They went somewhere else and got married. In less than 6 weeks, she came to me and said, you know what? I knew I shouldn't have married him. And she immediately got her divorce. She had some good characteristics, but the core values that irritate you. If a person has characteristics, values that irritate you, that are not good and healthy for you, you need to let that person go and find somebody else that has a value system that's compatible with yours. You say, well, there are no people out here whose value system is compatible with mine. If your value system has some healthiness and merit to it, sure there is. You're not the only good person in the world, and you're not the only good person that's the best person. So there is a person for you, and God has cultured and conditioned that person, and it is your responsibility to sift until you find him and wait until you find him. All right, another question. How does a married woman go from tolerating her husband to celebrating him? Well, there are some things that people like. Everybody loves to be complimented. That's a good way of celebrating. Everybody likes to be complimented. Everybody likes to be complimented publicly. Everybody likes to be bragged on. Everybody likes to be given some things that they like. For example, there are people who love attention. There are people who like desserts. There are people who like gifts. There are people who just like the presence of someone. So all of those are ways. Now, I'll be very glad to share with you individually. We'll do a little assessment of your husband and we'll find what are some things. Most men make it evident and obvious. What are the things that they compliment you for doing and criticize you for doing? You celebrate him by doing the things that he compliment you for, the things that makes him feel whole, healthy, and appreciated. But I'd be very glad to share specifically if you'll get in contact with me. We'll do a little quick profile on demand, and we will show you how to make it happen quickly and easily. Thanks for that question. Are there other questions? I love questions. We've got 7 more minutes. I'll give you all 7 of them if you want it. If you don't want it, I'll let you go to bed early tonight. It's up to you. If you have a question or comment, go ahead and type it into the Q&A section. If you'd like to have a conference with me, contact me, and I will be delighted to share with you. Be delighted to share. Don't be shy. We have people on tonight from all over the nation. We probably have 10 or 15 different states represented here tonight. And I want to thank all of you for being on tonight. Let me tell you what we're talking about next week, because next week, Michael Dublin from the South Central Church of Christ in Raleigh, North Carolina, he is going to really help men next week. So mothers, sisters, and wives, you can be on here next week to help your husband, help your brother, or help your friend. Mike Dublin is going to address the topic next week. Okay, he's going to talk on the 19th. How do Christian men stay spiritually charged while living in a sexually charged society? And then on the 26th, competing for the mind and morals of my children, raising God-fearing, professional, and progressive children. You really don't want to miss that. It's been a pleasure sharing with you tonight. There doesn't seem to be any more questions. I'm going to bid you farewell. There is a recording of this program tonight. You can access this program by 12 o'clock tomorrow. It may be available by 12 o'clock tonight. As a matter of fact, I tell you what, this program is going to be available for your viewing it's going to be available for your viewing within 20 minutes. I'm just going to make sure that I put this on the YouTube. Just type in the Grace View Church of Christ, Anderson, South Carolina, and it's going to be on the YouTube for your viewing. It will be there within 20 minutes. Someone said for next week's panel, what is the recommended age? Well, I didn't talk to Mike specifically about that, but Mike is one that leaves nothing untouched. I would say your sons who are 12 and above, get them on and he will bless their lives, because by the time they are 12, they are being enticed either intentionally or accidentally. Thanks for that question. It has been a pleasure tonight sharing with you. If this has been a blessing for you, give me a thumbs up. If I have irritated you to no end, I want to know that. I'm 6'1", I can handle the irritation, but that was not my intent. Oh, we have a hand up. Okay, let's see here. No, that person must have put their hand up by accident. So they got off quickly. They didn't have anything to say. It's been a pleasure tonight sharing with you. Be encouraged, and we will see you next week.